let's talk about what you heard from President Trump today. Was he as anti-multilateralism and hostile to the UN as he's been in the past, or did you feel a different sense from him today?
I think the starting point today was one of supporting the UN, but a more effective and more maybe legitimate United Nations, cutting on bureaucracy and just dealing more effectively with the crisis we see around the world.
Do you worry that that there are going to be cuts in US contributions and that might affect the very multilateral efforts that you say are necessary?
Yes, of course we do, but because we have seen it already, and we've seen that, for example, the support to sexual and reproductive health has been cut, and that affects women and girls around the world in a very unfortunate way. But I think this was not the starting point today as they described it, but rather to see that the money is used in the best possible way.
Do you get a sense, well, first let's talk about the Iran nuclear deal. I know that Sweden wasn't a formal signatory to it, but most of the countries support it. Do you get the sense that President Trump is going to pull the US out of it or not?
Well, we can only judge from what has been said, and of course this is another worry that might happen. You know, as a member of the European Union, we have spent years to invest in getting this deal, and I think also today we can say that the Iranians are living up to it. Apparently that is what the Atomic Energy Agency says, and I think this is a deal that actually improves security not only in that region but also in the rest of the world. So we care a lot about this agreement with Iran.
And of course, sorry to interrupt you, but it's happening right in the middle of this nuclear crisis with North Korea. The Iranians say if the US pulls out, it sets a very bad precedent. What do you say about whether there are any new ideas inside the Security Council, at the UN, the UNGA, for trying to deal with North Korea?
Oh, that's the topic of the day. So of course, in every meeting here, North Korea is on the agenda. And I think that there is it's a very determined atmosphere here to see what else can we do. First of all, to implement the sanctions that have already been decided on, but also hopefully to be able to offer a kind of diplomatic, political way out and way into the future. And that is as important, because I don't think that a war of words will add to de-escalate the crisis or to make it less tense.
Do you feel, I mean, obviously, you know, you've put in new sanctions, the UN Security Council has, but you don't have a united front. And everybody says there needs to be a united front if North Korea is going to pay attention. Members of the Security Council disagree. I mean, China and Russia do not agree with the rest of the permanent members.
Well, I think after all, this has been placed firmly on the agenda of the Security Council. There have been constructive meetings and decisions on further sanctions, the toughest sanctions regime we've seen against North Korea. So now it is really a matter of making sure that they are lived up to. And implementation is key, and it doesn't happen from one day to another. Also the effects of this. But I think in parallel we have to look at what are the diplomatic, political ways we can find to engage in a debate that has to be one about the whole region, because they all want security arrangements. So that is something that we should be also concerned with.
I mentioned Russia. Let's move on to Russia. Russia is holding its military exercises very close to the European frontier. Europe is quite scared. NATO has been quite worried about what it's doing. You, Sweden, a non-NATO member, have held your biggest military maneuvers with NATO help in 2 decades. What are you scared of?
Not NATO help, it's actually the United States of America that are being invited.
Right.
And we do have cooperation, including with the NATO and also with a number of European countries and others, and of course in the region. No, we have seen a very provocative behavior in our neighborhood. We've seen that against our Baltic neighbors, but we've also seen, of course, the most serious breach of the European security order when Russia illegally annexed Crimea, and also the aggression in eastern Ukraine. So that is the starting point of all of this.
But I mean, Sweden must be, you know, being pretty, I mean, you sound alarmed, and we've just been obviously showing the pictures of the Russian games and President Putin was there. But you've also reintroduced conscription. I mean, what's going on in your region? Because we know that the NATO Secretary General, you know, had to speak to the Russian Chief of the General Staff to make sure nothing bad happens across this border.
We don't feel sort of an immediate military threat towards Sweden, but we realize that if something happens in our neighborhood, in the Baltic area, we will also be affected by that. But we have decided in this government that we will stay militarily non-aligned, and that means also that we will invest in our own defense capacity, and that is what we are doing exactly. And we also believe that cooperation with other organizations and other countries is the way forward. So we have engaged on all these fronts, and these are the three pillars of our security policy.
And part of that is Russia's interference in a lot of elections, not just in the United States, allegedly, but also around Europe. Do you feel that the recent elections in Europe, whether it's in France, whether it's upcoming in Germany, previously in the Netherlands and Austria, do you think populism has been defeated? Or are you still trying to, you know, defend the liberal world order, so to speak?
Well, there are two things to say about this. First of all, that the first line of defense might not even be foreign policy, but it might be cybersecurity, you know, that we can see that there is disinformation, that there is interference in electoral processes in different countries. So this is very important to be vigilant and to really look out for that. But I also think that we need to continue to fight populism. We haven't got rid of populism, but we see more of extremism, extremist positions also politically, and that is something we have to take into account and also design our policies accordingly.
This also happening obviously in the context of Brexit and many other things, but I want to ask you about the feminist foreign policy that you staked out. And you know, you took that message to Saudi Arabia as well as other countries with a very poor record on gender equality. How's that working out for you?
It's working out really well.
Really?
Because it is not something mysterious. It's about ensuring that women enjoy the same rights as men all around the world, and that is of course a legal responsibility. Secondly, that they are represented, that they are around the table, even in peacekeeping operations or where decisions are being made. And thirdly, that resources are also put aside to meet the needs of women and girls. So it's really a method. It's an analysis of what the world looks like, and it is also a method. And these are the tools that we can use.
And what about the countries that remain hostile to that kind of method?
Well, I think even countries that might sound hostile to begin with, they realize that women make up half of the world's population. Without women, they will not achieve a sustainable peace in any country. And we know that more women means more peace. And I think, as somebody said, you know, feminism is really the radical notion that women are human beings. So I think that's what we have to do.
I think at least half the population will agree with you. Foreign Minister Margot Wallström, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.